and welcome to the Politics of Food, a panel discussion where we have all kinds of illustrious panelists. We have Diane Hatz, C. Reku, Rio, Rachel Parent, Lisa Carlin, Ashley Greenwald, and Dorit will be moderating. We welcome everyone to ask questions and participate, and we'll be reading your questions to our panelists. So thank you so much. We'll have announcements about the next panel ahead at the very end, so please enjoy.
Thank you all for coming. So for those, Vanessa is our announcer, and she is going to be the one for everybody who's viewing this. If you have questions or comments, please post them, and Vanessa will be in charge of making sure that all of us hear them, and we will acknowledge them, and we will also, if you need us to, respond. So please go ahead and participate. We welcome your full participation and your voice. So welcome to Lisa, to Ray, to Rio, to Ashley, Diane Hatz, Rachel, and of course, Vanessa, who is partnering with me on this. Today, the topic is a topic that is very treacherous to me. It's a topic of the politics of food. So my first question, I will keep until you've all introduced yourselves. So what I'm going to do is, Vanessa, do you have the order? Okay, it's fine. We're going to go ahead and just introduce Lisa first, then Ray, Rio, just as you're listed right now, the way you're being shown on screen. Ashley Arpel Greenwald, Diane Hatz, Rachel Parent, and then I will lead with some questions. So you all have 3 minutes to speak with us, speak with the audience, and let us know about you. So please go ahead. Lisa, you are on. Lisa, unmute yourself, unmute.
I should know that. I do this all the time. Okay, everybody. Hi, my name is Lisa Carlin, and I'm a Food for Life instructor with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I'm also a media journalist and contributor to the Jane Unchained News Network, and I have a series that I do every Friday morning at 10 a.m. called Hey Doc, What's New in Plant-Based Medicine? And I interview the most prestigious, well-known, respected plant-based physicians, dietitians, and nurses. I've got a nurse on in a couple of weeks in the healthcare community who bring forth information that's really new and it's science-based. And many of these people that I have on my show have written best-selling books. I've had in the past Dr. Joel Kahn. I've had Dr. Neil Barnard was my guest last week. And this week I have Dr. Angie Sadeghi on Friday. So let's talk a little bit about the politics of food. It's a subject near and dear my heart because there are so many areas within the country, within the United States, that actually have food deserts, meaning they don't have a major grocery store. They're lucky to have a convenience store and shopping places that are almost like shopping at a gasoline station convenience store. And when you ask kids about fruits and vegetables, they can't identify the most easily identifiable fruits and vegetables that one would find in a major grocery store. So I really think we need more food education. And for so many people, especially working moms and single working moms who really don't have the time and energy, they think, to cook, they'll take their kids to fast food because you can get things off the dollar menu and sometimes feed your kids for just a few dollars. And that's okay. And I think that's really a problem because these foods are highly processed, they're very high in sugar, salt, and fat, and they lack the nutrients and antioxidants that everybody needs to eat. So nutrition education is really important. I think if everybody else can mute themselves, we're getting the feedback from that would be helpful. That's better. So it's really important for people to learn how to cook. And now we have Food for Life courses, and many of them are free or they're vary for a nominal amount, where we'll teach people about food and about how to prepare simple, easy meals that would really even cost less than going to the dollar menu at McDonald's. So that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. I think that we need to eat and think about eating the rainbow. It really isn't about figuring out how much of each food we should eat or how much of each macronutrient, such as protein and carbohydrates and fats. If you're eating whole plant food, the ratio of those macronutrients will fall into place as Mother Nature wants them to. So if you have a whole grain for breakfast, such as oatmeal, and nothing is cheaper than buying oatmeal in bulk. You can buy it in bulk and make it for really, less than pennies a bowl. So whole grain oats that aren't processed is a great type of breakfast. We should be having not certainly abstaining from eating meat, eggs, and dairy, because these foods tend to be highly processed. They tend to have lots of chemicals in them. Even if they're organic, they still contain components that increase the risk for our most serious chronic diseases, such as heart disease. So we really promote a whole food plant-based diet and abstaining from meat, eggs, dairy, and fish, which is better for the environment and better for climate change. Well, what do we eat? We can have a burrito. We can have a bean burrito for lunch. We can have lentil soup. We can have a big salad that not only has lots of dark leafy greens, but that also contains fruit, maybe dried fruit, some nuts, some beans, some lentils. And I always tell people, if they're going to eat a salad, the bowl should be big enough to fit on their head. And that should be the size salad that an adult eats, not the little tiny side salad. It's not enough. So make your salads big and put a lot of things in them. And it should take you a while to eat it, because that chewing is really important for your dental health and to masticate all that food. So, nice big salad. And so we have fruits and vegetables and legumes, which are beans, peas, and lentils. There are lots of studies that show people who eat beans, they're the universal food or legumes are the universal food of longevity, 3 times a day. So for those who say, I'm not eating refried beans for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I say have a tofu scramble for lunch, lentil soup for tofu scramble for breakfast, lentil soup for lunch, and you can have a bean burrito for dinner, and it can come in various forms. And then lunch and dinner is pretty similar. It can be the same types of foods, but it should be colorful. So there should be plenty of colorful vegetables and colorful fruits on your plate, with the bulk of it being starchy foods, because starchy foods minus the fat is what fills us up and gives us enough calories so that we can sustain ourselves to the next meal. I would like to see, and we have a bill in this before the social compassion legislation, a group I volunteer for actually has a bill before the California State Legislature to incentivize schools in the state of California to offer more plant-based options. So that is evolving. We're hoping that's going to get through the legislature this year. We'll have an answer by the time everything closes in the spring of 2021. But really, the answer to so many of the problems that plague us is our dependence on fast food and our reluctance to cook whole food that's plant-based. And if anybody has any questions, you can certainly contact me through my Facebook, which is Lisa Carlin, or my Instagram, which is @LJCarlin, and I'll be happy to answer your questions, make referrals, and help you get the access that you need. In the meantime, you can go to PCRM. That's the acronym for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. There's lots of educational materials on there, and it's all based on science. It's not based on anecdotes or what people think. It's based on what the science says. So that's really the best way that I like to teach people. And sign up for a Food for Life class. You can do that through PCRM.org. It's been a pleasure being able to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So the next person is Reku of Raw Cane Super Juice, based in Los Angeles, California, but available all over the United States. Ray, take it away.
Hi, thank you for inviting me on this panel. So my background prior to creating Raw Cane Super Juice in 2006 was in public education, and I was a U.S. history. But my side gig while I was teaching was programs to transform nutrition in the lunchroom. And so one of the big projects that headed and was luckily very successful with the kids, with the middle school kids, was taking back our pride in our foods. 95% Latino community of students. And a big thing was, well, in order to transform our health, we had to make choices that was much more plant-based and put live foods in our body, and really changing the food structure from tons of samples and packaged subsidized foods that the government was giving us, since I only worked with Title I schools, with fruits and veggies. So, and of course, bringing a social so that kids felt excited about this transition. So, years ago, I transitioned into owning a small business, which the premise of Super Juice is we are the revolution against refined sugar and food lifestyle. So, with that, I'm so excited to be on this, and I was nodding the entire time that Lisa was speaking, because it was a perfect segue to what I'd like to bring up. First, I'm going to start with just a couple numbers and facts, but 90% of premature Americans, by premature, they consider it those under 60 years old. So I have a few more years before I'm supposed to like bomb out, I guess. But 90% of those deaths are attributed to non-communicable disease. The reverse of that is to say 9 out of 10 deaths are lifestyle relational deaths, premature. So let's hold that number in our head, and let's foil that number against this, which is right under $5 billion is spent per year on just advertising for the fast food industry. Now, of course, the number of dollars for advertising food in the small trillions, but five that is just in a few large fast food chains, namely McDonald's, which strangely enough, I'm sure everyone's heard about it, but they are also somehow incorporated into this whole COVID-19 nowadays. If you show proof that you've gotten your test, then you get some McDonald's coupon. So figure out how it works. I don't. But with all this, a lot of my life goal, and also it's driven through the goal of Rocking Super, is to really look at how we, on a social level, so that as consumers, especially our youth, that they begin demanding for the large companies to reflect their desires. And as you all know, this particular generation, the millennials, it's very exciting. We've never had such a plant-based generation until now. And a lot of it, I think, attributes to they grew up in a period just a lot of BS and adversity, and they see it. They have access to multiple levels of media that might not be mainstream. And so they have rejected a lot of the basic models that, say, my generation was influenced under, and they have decided to go rogue and their own destinies. How do we now impress the large corporations to create models of wealth, because that's the goal, same time, create models of wealth that actually help that all prosper under. So, with that said, Rock was created out of the we took the idea of an ethnic food, which is sugarcane, and considered 50 cents, $1 cultures not appropriate at all. And we are compiling most of the research behind it. And the thing, the way this was created was there's a lot of politics and social mores that create the concept of what is valuable and what is. If you have spending $5 billion on convincing you that non-valuable things are extremely valuable and nutritious, well, how do you work against that when you're dealing with like a measly little food such as just sweetening? 90% of American calories are subsidized sugars. 90. This means not only conglomerate advertising to you, but the government is behind it all, supporting that. That 90% of your caloric intake should be refined sugar. And this is why we, AKA, call ourselves the cane pushers, because the corporations and government, they are drug pushers to get the kids super addicted and to have a lifelong relationship of this addiction. So for us to put our business in an area where prior to like about 5 years ago, East Hollywood, it's still the hood, but it was really, really hood. It was considered one of the food deserts. Where we looked around, literally we would have customers coming in going, why are you here? This is so weird for providing this service. But our main thing was to be in areas where people rethink, how do you consume this energy intake that we must have, which is polysaccharides, which is natural sugars, but it's been hijacked by a corporate and political structure that gives you this forever shelf life, highly profitable, empty sugar that gets you nothing more, high for the moment, false energy, and lifelong addiction, so that they ensure that their profit and their pockets are always going to be. So these are the things that we work with as Raw Cane Super Juice. I mean, what you see is just a particular product, and that is raw sugar cane juice. But what's really behind it is this is our act of social wellness, and to give people out simply as how is sugar derived, and natural, and how efficient is the sugar that you're putting in your body. And then on top of that, reappropriating foods that were considered ethnically inferior and thus not being able to create high prices with. And for us, part of our job is reappropriating. What I mean by that is you take, for example, chow mein, 99 cents, fettuccine, $12.99. So there is a lot of politics involved in how particular foods are. Sugar has always been seen as, oh, that's low end, yet we can take on a lot of sugar, which is not nearly nutritious as that at the highest end, because that's used by women. So there's politics involved in. Thank you, everyone, for now.
Thank you very much, Ray. Our next speaker is Ashley Arpo Greenwald. Ashley, you are now live on the screen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Arpel Greenwald. Thank you for the introduction. I am a food photographer and food stylist, and as of January, a published author. I wrote a cookbook called Think Outside the Lunchbox. It has over 250 100% plant-based recipes. It is, as of actually a few days ago, almost sold out on Amazon, so go get it. I am also an actress and TV host, and specifically, I'm about to start creating a food I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say everything about it, but a very healthy and well-balanced web series. I do want to snowball a little bit off of what Lisa said earlier. 37% of Americans regularly eat at places like McDonald's, Burger King, all fast food. And actually in Atlanta specifically, there was a study and it said 1 in 3 adults eat some type of fast food daily. My goal is to somehow, some way, transform America in a sense that we need more healthy and well-balanced meals served at fast food restaurants, or open up more fast food restaurants that incorporate organic living. A lot of people have come up to me or have DM'd me on social media. My Instagram is at That's Ashley's Kitchen. And a lot of people have said, I can't afford, that was my phone. I can't afford to eat a healthy plant-based life. I don't have time to cook that type of recipe. I just can't do it. Well, part of the goal of my cookbook and just in general is that I want to show that it's not as hard as people think to live a plant-based life or to live a vegan life. There are a plethora of different reads, books, recipes out there that you can get. And snowballing off of that, it's not just the big time grocery stores. You can grab food from, I'm blanking on the name right now. Oh, Smart and Final. They have a great organic and natural section. So that is why I'm here to talk about the politics of food.
Well, thank you very much, Ashley. We will come back to you shortly. And right now, we're introducing Diane Hatz of Change Food.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Hatz. I am a social entrepreneur, and I have been a healthy food advocate for over 20 years. Currently, I am the CEO founder of Boma Grow USA. We're an event and collaboration platform that's focused on regenerative food and farming. Because of COVID, we've been stalled a bit. We are currently redefining what an event is. I also am the founder and executive director of Change Food, which is a nonprofit. We work to create a healthier food system for people, animals, and the planet. I also was the founder and the host of TEDx Manhattan, Changing the Way We Eat, a few years ago. So I believe that eating is a political act. The current program that Change Food has right now is called Plant, Eat, Share. I started noticing that communities around the world, we're doing different types of efforts to plant food, to share it with the neighborhood and with residents for free. So what we're currently doing is we're bringing together all these different types of programs. So for example, Atlanta has a 7.1 acre food forest. And if you haven't heard of a food forest is where you plant different layers of food trees and plants that anyone can go in and harvest and eat themselves. There's also gleaning, foraging, community gardens. So these little pockets, the city of Copenhagen, about 6 months ago, passed a law. They're planting berry and fruit trees and bushes all around the city in their public parks. I believe that this is one of the great ways to address the food accessibility and the food affordability issue. It's a mind shift change for some people, because what I'm saying is I believe that everybody has the right to eat healthy food and money should not be an object. I do not believe this is going to put farmers out of business or put even grocery stores out of business, but what it will do is it will provide the opportunity for everyone to have access to healthy food, to get used to eating healthier food, and it will help with the shift to a more plant-based diet. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much, Diane. Well, the next person is from Canada, and this is Rachel, but I wanted, before we go to Rachel, for you, Diane, to talk about the tour that you did when you came to Los Angeles, and you rented a bus and you went cross-country to promote sustainable food, and exactly what your experiences were and how you were received. And I would like to think about that after we finish introducing everyone, because I thought that was one of the most proactive acts I've ever seen on behalf of sustainable food in this country. So now to Canada. Rachel, please take the microphone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Parent, and I'm the founder of Kids Right to Know, nonprofit organization. I am based out of Toronto, Canada, and Kids Right to Know was formed, I guess, somewhat by accident. I got involved in activism over 10 years ago now, and that all happened when I found out about the word GMO, and my life completely changed forever. I found out that they were linked to so many issues around us, from deforestation to our destruction of health, environmental decline, our pollinators, our bees, our butterflies, all declining. And I felt the need to take action. And this was around the time of Proposition 37 in California, where they were trying to get mandatory GMO labeling. Through learning about that bill, I started to find out that Canada and the US are the only two industrialized nations in the entire world that don't require mandatory GMO labeling. And I just felt.
I'm Diane Hatz. I am a social entrepreneur, and I have.
Oh boy, okay, we have a problem. Hold on a second, Rachel.
No worries.
For some reason, okay, go ahead now.
Sure. So through finding out about that, I felt the need to take action, and I think that was my first real exposure to seeing how our food is political, because these massive corporations such as Monsanto, Bayer, Syngenta, they did not want mandatory GMO labeling. In fact, in California, they spent $47 million to prevent Americans from having the right to know what's in their food. And they performed all sorts of shady experiences so people wouldn't even have the opportunity to vote. And that has been mirrored time after time with every mandatory GMO labeling bill, whether it be in the US or Canada. And so my activism started with that, and trying to teach kids about the importance of healthy eating and the impact our food has, and what ingredients are genetically modified, how we can all slowly shift our diets and move towards a regenerative system. And one of the things that I've started to find out more and more, and especially in the past few years, is really how controversial and political our food is. Myself being vegan as well, I know that not all vegan diets are equal. We see things like the Impossible Burger that are incredibly damaging to our bodies. So we need to make sure, as people who practice plant-based diets, that we aren't ingesting things like glyphosate, genetically modified soy, things that are really destroying our ecosystems and environment. And one of the things I do also want to talk about is the fact that our food is really responsible for our declining health. Although food is supposed to be our medicine, currently it is part of our destruction due to glyphosate and our ability to no longer absorb the nutrients we need in our bodies. So food has become a political act. The food that we buy, the money that we spend, is really all a vote for the kind of world that we want to see.
Wonderful. So I would like the next person, Rio, before we actually start, because she's also big. She was the first person I knew who publicly actually went on radio and devoted a whole radio show podcast to stopping Monsanto when we could have stopped them. So Rio, please introduce yourself, and then we're going to continue with the topic of GMOs afterwards, because I think in a subject such as the politics of food, we cannot ignore that, because that is probably the most political thing that we're facing right now. So Rio, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Rio. I'm the author of a book called Hooked on Raw. In my book, I have chapters.
Hold on, Rio. Would everyone please mute their mics? Would everyone please mute their mics? Thank you. Go ahead.
In my book, I have a chapter. Sorry. In my book, I have a chapter on GMOs. And that was 20 years ago that I wrote this book. For 10 years after that, I was lecturing on GMOs. I studied as best I could. I read all the Jeffrey Smith books, and I went to all the websites that were talking about the dangers of GMOs. And
can I make
because I have a farm,
Rio,
because I love nature so much, and
Rio,
I wanted to
I'm stopping you.
see what I could do to preserve nature. the subject of GMOs, trying to make people understand what they are and how GMOs, genetically engineered foods or genetically modified foods, are changing the nature of nature, where actually humans are altering the DNA of plants. And that is something that we don't know how to retrieve that. We don't know how to bring it back to what it was. We are actually changing the nature of nature. And because the general public is not understanding of this, it's being allowed to go forward. When Obama was coming into office, when he was campaigning, he said that people in the United States had the right to know what foods were genetically engineered. But then what happened during his administration, he revolved in and appointed someone called Michael Taylor. Now, Michael Taylor has been a lawyer for Monsanto for years. He was revolved in during the two of the Bush administrations, and then he revolved in again in the Obama administration. So I don't understand how Obama could say one thing and then do the exact opposite of that. I am looking forward to talking a lot next week. I know that you have the webinar on GMOs, so I'm hoping to explain at least the first few steps of GMO, because there's a saying that says a little information is dangerous. That means, to me, what that means is you don't know what you're talking about if you know just a little bit of information. But with GMOs, all you have to know is just the first few steps of how they're doing it. And if you love nature, and want to preserve nature in all her glory, you will understand it just from that.
Great. Thank you, Rio. So Lee, please keep your mic off all the time. Whenever we're coming on, just unmic yourselves, everyone. But I think we've now tackled that audio problem. So my next question to you all is, why do you think we need a topic called the politics of food? So we already have established with both Rachel and Rio that there is one huge topic, which is the topic of genetically modified foods and companies taking over food supplies. But why do you all personally, each of you, believe that we have an issue with food as a political weapon or political device? And we're going to go in the order in which you started, except for Lisa, because you are going to be the third person. Ray, would you please answer that question to the best of your abilities? And if you do not like the question, just add whatever you would like. Ray, you need to unmute yourself and speak, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So let me just we all have with in itself. This is the best way to control if we believe that politics is set up so that there is some of crowd or a response, so that powers are fortified, powers that are taken away from us. Well, the best ways to do it there. So both those lot of companies that work alongside with the drug that work.
Ray, could you stay still because you're coming in and out of audio? We can't always hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, how's that? Is that, you know what? Is this a better audio sound?
Yes. Yeah, and if you could just stay still, that would be great.
Oh, that is challenging for me. Okay, so, and that's why I don't do refined sugars, because I would be flying right now. All right, so yeah, I don't know if you guys heard that, but the bottom line is like there's a whole circle to this. I mean, the chemical companies, the GMOs, the food industry, pharmaceuticals, medical insurance, doctors, the allopathic, hospital care, all of these, or even the discussion of how the non-discussion of how disease and illnesses take hold of us, which that's what we're in the era of, right? We constantly are putting out a lot of messages of, oh, fear this, fear that, yet there's really very little set up to say, hey, how do you empower yourself? How do you get healthier? How do you ensure that, you don't get these illnesses, other than, well, just cover yourself completely and don't go anywhere, and wait for a vaccine. So, I mean, this is where, I mean, for me, again, it's like, absolutely, there's politics in food, because if you believe that politics is set up so that it shifts and creates elicited responses so that economics and power can be within a certain construct, then they're going to find ways to be able to penetrate all of us. And one of the best ways is through food source, because we all have to eat. And this is why, it's really, really important, at least, for me, one of my lifetime devotions is how do we find the powers within ourselves, and how do we empower young people to make the choices and to have critical thinking and to begin taking full agency over their bodies. Well, one of the number one things is evaluate your daily processes. And if you have to eat 1, 2, 3, 5 times a day, and you're putting something in your mouth or you're drinking something, evaluate that, understand what it is, and fight the powers that say, don't evaluate it, don't think about it, just put it in your mouth. And look at, I don't remember the name, but Ashley's Kitchen. Oh, Ashley. Look at the processes that are occurring behind this. Like, get to know your farmers. I think that for young people, it's really important that they get involved in some type of summer camp, or there's organizations such as Garden School Foundation, where they weave the state standards of education in with gardening and growing your own food. And these kids, they get to touch the earth and be able to claim something that they've created over months and eat it, and then they get to share it with their families, and they get to decide how should this harvest that they've created be distributed in their communities. I mean, so in all of these processes, you're dealing with like a little 6-year-old child who's able to see everything from seed to table and beyond, table to economic empowerment, and how money is distributed.
Excellent. Thank you. And now your audio is working, so please keep it the way it is. And
Okay.
just unmute yourself while we go to Ashley. And Ashley, I don't know if you remember the question, but if not, it's fine. I want you to actually just go ahead and let me know if you are able to remember the question first.
The question about GMOs?
No. Why is food a political issue?
Oh, well, I think food is a political issue. I mean, because of everything that we've been discussing, I feel like in America, it's very severe, the lack of knowledge that children, as she said, children actually to adults have throughout the process of creating food and then being able to either purchase it or create it themselves. It's a tough question to broadly answer. I feel like there are many different there's a plethora of different ideas within that. But there are definitely politics within food. I think it all goes back to just having the knowledge to know where you can get it, how you can get it, if you can get it, and when you can get it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So with that, Lisa, I would like you to come back on, and you brought up a topic very near and dear to my heart, which is that of food deserts. Would you please explain in as much detail as possible, without taking the rest of the time, because this could go on for another hour?
All right, so food deserts are areas where people live and they don't have access to a Walmart, a Costco, a major grocery store like Vons or Albertsons, a Whole Foods, Sprouts. They basically have to get their food at convenience stores. So they tend to have Spam, which is a processed meat. They tend to have, if they're lucky, they can get a banana and a tomato. But those are fruits and vegetables are very hard to get. They're pretty much limited to foods that don't require refrigeration. So think about all the canned foods. And when you think of canned foods, they are inherently high in sodium. So that's also not good for people. So I think it's just important to be able to have a relationship, find out where you can get fresh food. Even Amazon will deliver fresh food. But the idea is you get fresh food, then you got to wash it and you got to store it, and then you have to chop it up and cook it in some way, unless it's fruit that you can just eat. Certainly should be washed in order to eat with. And people seem to have an aversion to wanting to do anything in the kitchen. And if people would just take a class, the Food for Life classes I mentioned before with Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine will teach people how to make fairly simple recipes from a small number of ingredients. You're not going to see a list of ingredients like this. There are many things that can just be made very, very simply. And I want to say, in order to really, we go back to the politics of food, that has to do with the subsidies, the federal subsidies. And for anybody who doesn't understand what that is the federal government subsidizes the production, the agriculture production in the dairy industry and in the meat industry. That would mean pig farmers, chicken farmers, cattle farmers, and they get money to decrease the cost. So if we took away the subsidies and we had to just pay the true cost of what it would be to buy a pound of ground beef or to eat a chicken, it would be way more expensive than we're used to paying, because the subsidies are able to mitigate the cost. So I think, first of all, what we need to do, because heart disease is our #1 killer. And after that comes complications from diabetes. So no one really dies from diabetes. They die from the complications of diabetes, which are often heart disease, which is what makes heart disease the #1 killer. And then you've got all kinds of blood clots and strokes and lack of perfusion of oxygen to our organs because of sick blood vessels. So it may not even be the kind of disease that gives you a heart attack. It could be the kind of disease that gives somebody a blood clot in their foot. Or in their brain or somewhere else. So the key to all of this is to eat a whole food, plant-based diet. That means fruit, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, which are beans, peas, and lentils, mushrooms, nuts, and seeds. And that is really what we should be eating. And when you take any of those foods and you process it, taking away the fiber, you necessarily have a much less healthier food. So everything that I put in my mouth, with the exception of water, has fiber in it. I don't drink juice anymore because juice has the fiber removed. We need that fiber to feed our gut microbiome. And now people are hearing so much more about the function of our gut microbiome. Those are the bacteria that live in our gut. They live in our small intestine, in our large intestine, in our colon, and they live in a symbiotic relationship with us. In other words, they help us and we help them. And if we don't feed them, then they make components that help to make us sick. So it's a very complicated subject, but if I just sort of take a broad brushstroke and paint the picture, everything you put in your mouth should have the fiber that originally came with that food. So even juice should be something that we have rarely, because you strip away the fiber from juice. So the only fiberless food that I ever put in my mouth is water, or maybe tea. And after that, everything has fiber. That's the key. And once we have fiber, constipation goes away. We feed our gut microbiome, and they can help us metabolize our food, so we're able to get more bang for the buck. We actually are able to absorb more nutrition, because you aren't what you eat. You are what you absorb. So you can put lots of food into your mouth and it comes out the other end, and it never benefits you. The food that we eat needs to be broken down either in the stomach or in the small intestine, so that it's in small enough components so it can be absorbed and transported to the liver, so we can, in fact, make the cellular components that we need in order to feed all the cells of our body. That's the bottom line. If we could get people to understand whole food, plant-based, stop removing the fiber, no one would be constipated. It goes away. Whenever a client tells me they're constipated, they're telling me, number one, they don't drink enough water, and number two, they're not eating whole food. Because when you switch somebody over under controlled circumstances, it's amazing. Everything moves through them. So I really want to encourage everybody to think about that. And let me end with the latest article that came out of the Cochrane Library. And the Cochrane Library, if you are a scientific researcher and you get your research published in the Cochrane Review, you have reached the pinnacle of success, beyond the Lancet, beyond the New England Journal of Medicine, beyond any publication. If you get to the Cochrane Library, you've made it. And the latest article that came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago in the Cochrane Library is about saturated fat and cholesterol. And it finally put to rest the controversy about whether or not saturated fat, how bad it is for you. And the bottom line is, it is bad for us. It's terrible for us. And we should avoid it as much as possible. Now, there's saturated fat in a certain amount of vegetables. Olives have saturated fat. You can eat some olives. Certainly, there's saturated fat in avocados. If that's your source of fat in your diet, then that's fine. But the saturated fat that comes in animal-based foods is very deleterious, because it comes with cholesterol, and you will never find cholesterol in a plant-based product. The only exception to that rule is coconut meat. The coconut flesh is very high in saturated fat. The coconut water is actually very healthy for us as an electrolyte. So now we know the data is in, looking at, and what the Cochrane Review does is they look at sources that do not have a biased or an inherent interest in promoting a certain product. Many of the nutrition articles are funded by the dairy industry or the Cattlemen's Beef Research Council, someone that has a vested interest in the research saying a little meat is okay. But that's not giving us good science, because we know the dairy industry is never going to allow an article to be published that says that dairy products are bad for you. Every single article that has ever been published in a journal in the world says dairy is good or it's not so bad. It never says that it's not healthy, when in fact it is very unhealthy, and it's the leading cause of saturated fat and cholesterol in our diet, and hence the leading cause of heart disease, which is our #1 killer around the world in Western countries. So this is a very serious issue. We really do want to pay attention to good, solid science. I have to tell you that Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine only republishes data that comes from legitimate science. And the best thing that we can do is encourage, by contacting our legislators, that we want to get rid of the subsidies, that these subsidies need to be abolished, and maybe with a new administration in November, we may be able to get closer to that. And the farmers should be creating foods that are healthy for us to eat, that we can eat in abundance, not the food that is making us sick. So there is politics. The best thing we can do is to encourage our legislators who work for us. Now in California, that would be the state assembly and our state senate, but we can write to them. We can get involved. There's another organization that I volunteer with called Social Compassion and Legislation, and we put forth a bunch of bills that got passed and signed into law by both Governor Brown and when he was governor, and Governor Newsom. And we think we've really done a lot to change the world. I could talk a lot. I want to let the next speaker have a chance to talk, but certainly that contacting the people who help make laws is how we can really make our voice known. Social Compassion in Legislation.org and Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. PCRM.org are the two organizations that you can read about and get involved with. Thank you.
Could I jump in really quickly here, Dorit?
Yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge some of our, thanks Lisa. I just wanted to acknowledge some of our viewers who have written some great things in. We have David Wong, who wrote in that we need to change the term patients to health participants, which I think would be a marvelous transition for sure, much more empowering because they are the ones actively participating in their care. He's also saying how great it would be if everyone had access to fresh food. And Gwenna Hunter is expressing amazement that Monsanto is allowed to exist, that they're legally allowed to poison the people on this planet, which is such a great point. And I just wanted you all to hear of some of the people who are watching and commenting in. Thanks for that.
Thanks a lot, Vanessa. Diane, you're next.
So I just want to throw out that Monsanto technically does not exist anymore because Bayer bought them.
Yes.
They're still doing their horrible things, but you are not going to see their name. It is going to be Bayer. I think there were 125,000 lawsuits against them over with that ingredient in Roundup. I can't pronounce it, but so Monsanto is still there. Just know they've morphed. Just a couple comments I have about politics. Sam Cass worked in the Obama administration, and he will publicly state and has publicly stated that there is no political food movement. And that is what the big issue is, that congressmen do not hear from constituents. So that is an issue. I agree with Lisa on that. I do think that saying that just a new administration is going to change the farm bill or the subsidy system, which is in the farm bill, it's not going to happen. I've been doing this for 20 years. I hope nobody is sort of denigrating all the work that was done before, because we could not have stopped Monsanto before either. Big business is so in the pockets of elected officials, and that does need to be addressed. So we need a lot of political reform, not my area of expertise. I do think a lot of effort has been made, like a lot of success has happened. There would not have been 125,000 lawsuits against Monsanto/Bayer had people not been educated about the issues. Also, just if you guys don't realize, the term food desert is considered derogatory to generally people who live in food deserts. So I will say healthy food desert or healthy food, a place without healthy food. There is food in these places. It's just fast food. It's not healthy food. And just to add on to, I think it was what Lisa was saying, just to sort of add on to it, just so you understand, it's not a matter of there's not a Costco and you can just hop on a subway or get on a bus. People do not have money for subway fare. And you can't just go on and get Amazon. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard for a lot of people to understand, but people who are that lower income and that like socially challenged, they don't have internet. You know, that's the problem with education right now. People being homeschooled is someone I know in the Bronx who's a teacher. His students don't have internet, so they can get all the free iPads in the world. The other issue is with subsidies. Yes, meat is subsidized. Corn, wheat, and soy, I think, are subsidized more. That's where the GMO comes from. That is a huge issue. I think what's really important and why we need to talk about this publicly and amongst ourselves is we really do need to build, I hate the word coalition because they tend not to move, but we need more actions around getting stuff done on these issues, because it is changing. Like what I've seen just with the with how organics has become mainstream, how regenerative is coming in. There is huge movement, but we don't have 21 years. Like with climate change coming, we don't have the time we had before. So I just want to throw that out. But thank you everyone for your comments. This has been very informative.
Thank you so much, Diane. I really appreciate everything that you've said here. And Rachel, would you please give us the, first on mic yourself, and give us the Canadian politicization of food?
Absolutely. I want to clear that I think the political system in Canada and the US for food is very, very similar. Canada is often touted as being so much better and more transparency, more democracy, and that just isn't the case. Our political system is fairly similar. And because we do have so many trade agreements with the United States, our food is also very similar. And so the politicalization of our food has become something that we all experience daily, and we don't even realize it. As you mentioned, Diane, the fact is that corn and soy are subsidized at massive amounts. And of course, a lot of that food ends up being fed to animals in factory farms. A lot of that food ends up in our processed foods. This is corn and soy that is genetically modified and is sprayed with high levels of glyphosate as well as other herbicides, pesticides. Glyphosate is particularly a really toxic and damaging substance, and this is also because glyphosate is a registered antibiotic. So there's this whole movement against having antibiotics in meat, which is of course very important. But what most people don't realize is that if you're eating not just genetically modified foods, but there's about 70 crops currently that are sprayed with glyphosate. It's something called a pre-harvest desiccant, and it's where they spray the crop widely with it right before harvest so it dries out quicker and they can harvest it. And that means that we are eating straight residue levels of glyphosate in almost all of our meals. These are in things like chickpeas, lentils, wheat. The list goes on, and you can find that list online. And why this is an issue, we are building up antibiotic resistance in this age of pandemics. We need to be more and more aware of how our bodies are reacting to medicines, antibiotics. And beyond that, what's political about this is that even though majority of consumers do not want this in their food, do not want to continue to eat this, 80% of Canadians, 80% of Americans want mandatory GMO labeling. It is not becoming reality because of corporate lobbying. When corporations become involved with our government, with our politicians, it is automatically political. I spoke to a politician a few years back, and when I went to his office to talk to him about GMO labeling, there was a bill that was going through at the time. He said that even if 99% of his constituents wanted mandatory GMO labeling, that would not become a reality because it goes against his personal beliefs. I later learned that his personal beliefs include the fact that he rents out his land to someone who grows genetically modified canola. And on top of that, he had been visited by multiple corporations. We were there, quote unquote, lobbying for one day. We found out that Bayer and Syngenta were there almost 300 days a year. And so we need to stop this political lobbying within our government, because if we don't stop corporations from having a say over our own health, change can't be done. And that's why our food system is political, because it is corrupt.
You really answered that question beautifully. Thank you so much. I really like the fact that you stayed right on the politicization of food, because that's what this topic is. And it is such a major political force, both now in the US and also in Canada. And I would like to take a moment to congratulate Mexico. And for those of you who are tuning in next week, we will explain what Mexico has been doing to Bayer, who now operates as the front piece for Monsanto, close similar to what Diane was saying. And Diane, thanks for reminding us of that. So the next person is Rio. Rio, please unmic yourself. I think Rio might be frozen in time. So if Rio, if you can hear me, Mike.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead and speak then, please.
Okay, so I want to point out another level of the politics of food. There is a documentary called Life and Debt. Life and Debt. I think you can find it on Netflix. I saw it many years ago. It's a documentary about how American corporations decimated the economy of Jamaica. Now, American corporations have done the same in many countries over the world. Let's take Mexico, for instance. Mexico is the cradle of corn. They have hundreds of unique varieties of corn in Mexico. But because of what former speakers have said, subsidizing the corn in the United States, and 90% of the corn in the United States is genetically engineered. So the subsidizing of the corn in the United States creates a corn that is low cost. So when Mexican farmers plant their unique varieties of corn, and both corns, our corn floods Mexican markets, and Mexican farmers try to sell their corn on the market, naturally American corn is going to be much cheaper. And since a lot of people in Mexico are low-income people, they take advantage of this American corn and buy it. So then what happens is the Mexican grown corn is not sold. So effectively, we are putting Mexican farmers that grow corn out of business. And then what happens is we dislike the fact that Mexicans flood our borders over here trying to make a living for themselves, but we don't acknowledge what we have done to create some of this. So I would encourage everyone to get that documentary, Life and Debt, and to try to understand how American politics of food affects countries all over the world.
Thank you so much for that, Rio. I'm glad you brought that up because that is a topic that I don't think many people know about. And we will go much more in detail next week, speaking on GMOs, herbicides, and pesticides. I'd like to bring Ray in right now. Ray, would you by the way, Lisa, thanks for bringing up the subsidization, how food is subsidized in this country, because that is one of the most lethal weapons in the politicization of food, in my opinion. And Ray, would you address Lisa's comment about juices, please?
Oh, sure. Well,
Not having fiber.
Absolutely, fiber is extremely important in the diet, but there's something to be said also about direct nourishment and nutritional density. I mean, to say to every American or every world citizen, hey, you are to consume 4 pounds of greens per day. I don't know how feasible that is. Absolutely, you need the fiber, but you know, juicing is extremely fundamental when you're looking at, well, I need the minerals, the vitamins, the enzymes. Yes, you do need the fiber. But you know what's funny is that sugarcane juice, even though you juice it, it does have fiber. So we have a lot of what's called ppm, which is parts per million. So there's a lot of fiber. But I'm going to assume that Lisa was addressing more like general veggie
processed juices.
Well, that's another, that to me, that's not even juice. Just like I cannot say that, you know, a McDonald's French fries is elemental to a homegrown potato that doesn't have any hand with Bayer Monsanto. So two very, very different things. But actually, I wanted to just piggyback very, very briefly on something else she said, which is, well, you know, I mean, we can have a lot of access to food easily now by just going onto your Amazon app. But we have to think about this. If we know that politics, lobbyists, money, pharma, Amazon, everything is one circle, in order for us not to contribute to this circle that we are basically enslaved in, that we're fugitives of, or you know, indentured into, we have to think about every dollar, how we spend it. When you're going to click that app on your phone and you're going to use Amazon Fresh and you're going to buy your celery and your carrots and fruit, guess where part of that money goes back to? Exactly to the very same system that oppresses us by genetically modifying and giving us and substandarding all the certified organic standards. When big box grocers got involved, like Walmart, Vons, when they got involved in organics, which actually now, you know, they are some of the most profitable, and then they purchase all sorts of small companies. Like we were offered in our first 5 years money from Red Bull. We were offered to be purchased. We are consistently being offered by big box companies. We've just refused and decided to, you know, stay very, very small. But these big box companies, they're constantly going to hide themselves in ways like certified organic or, you know, nature made or whatnot, whatever's the newest trend, raw vegan even. They also co-opted this word of raw veganism. You know, you can look at some of these products that are labeled as such and you realize they've been HPP'd. One particular one, I won't even name the name. It's a pink coconut water that's out there that constantly says it's raw, but yet you look at the shelf life, and we all know coconut waters have a 3-day shelf life, but this shelf life is 6 months. Well, because they have sent their lobbyists to change the entire definition of raw and to include HPP, high pressure processing, because that is not over 118 degrees, yet it'll blast all the molecules and kill that off. And so people are consuming what they assume as these natural foods. They are buying into the convenience of Amazon offering us, and Vons and Instacart offering us all of this convenient health at our hand, forgetting that your contribution dollar by dollar is giving into the same cycle that has gotten us into this position of dis-ease. So I'm going to encourage everybody to think about, how do I unclick with my wallet from that circle? How do I grow my own food? How do I participate in the farmers markets that are direct to growers? Okay. How do I involve myself in, like, there's community farming, there one particular one, I just started working with them and I feel so bad I don't even remember their name, but it is a plant sharing. So in other words, I'm growing like a few zucchinis, I have extra, well, I can go ahead and put this on the app, and there's a barter system where my neighbor might have extra carrots and we can do a swap. We can do Zoom visits to each other's gardens so that we understand how we're practicing our gardening, because I certainly, if I want something that's extremely pure, I want to know that that compost is pure. I want to know that they haven't put in Vaughn's Organics, because that certification of organics also includes levels of pharmaceuticals that are acceptable, levels of herbicides that are acceptable. So I encourage everybody to think with your dollar. That is the politics of food. That is our revolution in the end, that dollar by dollar we move together as a people, and that the corporations will have to be responded to our movement of our dollars in order to get us, in order to keep us giving them money.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring in Vanessa here, but before I do, I want to go back to what Diane said, because it ties into what you just said, Ray. And this has a lot to do with the fact that there are many people who do not have access to the Wi-Fi, to broadband, and don't have phones, so they can't use an app. These are the people that I'm talking about when we talk about the fact that food is politicized and the fact that we need to include everyone. There's a reason why there are certain places that do not have access to fresh food, and there's a reason why other places, and more affluent places, do. And I don't think we've touched on that yet, but Diane did go towards that. So I'd like to bring back Diane. Diane after Vanessa, and then after Vanessa, Lisa, if you don't mind having the last word, but I'd like you all to keep it very under 2 minutes, please, because we are running a little over right now.
Okay, well, I think that we basically were mentioning that it's about money and control and power. And we didn't even talk about the farmers in India and the whole crisis that happened with that, where they were committing suicide because Monsanto, now Bayer, is claiming that their crops are owned by them and that they're basically becoming indentured servants of these large corporations. And the fact that these animal agriculture and pharmaceuticals and groups like Monsanto are paying off politicians so that they're able to keep doing what they're doing, producing. And we know that even insects won't eat GMO products, like that experiment where they had a piece of corn that was untouched by human hands, that was grown naturally, and then one done through genetically modified, and the insects wouldn't even touch the GMO one. So it's control of people, it's control of systems, and it's a global pandemic of its own. It is something that we don't know that much about in terms of the long-term health effects of it. And it's something where, as Rachel was pointing out, not labeling it takes away our choice. So it's an issue of power and control as well, that we're unknowingly and unwillingly taking in these products that are complete violations of our own wishes. So I know we're way over time, so I just wanted to say something really quickly, and then I'll come back at the end to announce our next panel.
Thank you, Vanessa. So Diane?
So this is exactly why Change Food is doing Plan, Eat, Share. Change is not going to happen at the top until the people are not going to change until they're forced to change. Communities everywhere need to know what's being done and be provided the resources so they can do it themselves. Anybody can plan food anywhere, even if you live in a totally, like an area with all cement. Ron Finley out in LA, if you don't know who he is, look into his guerrilla gardening, go to South Central and visit what he's done. He got the law changed in LA where you can plant food in that space between the sidewalk and the street. We need more people like that. We need more people not afraid to like stand up, organize their community. And this is a mutual aid. This is not a, I'm going to, be president of whatever organization that's going to change the food thing. I'm trying to empower people to do it themselves. And that's how I think things will change.
Thank you so much. And thanks for keeping it to 1 minute. I'm going to go next to Lisa for 1 minute, then Rachel for 1 minute, and then we end with Rio, 1 minute. Lisa, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Hi. So I could talk for a lot longer, but a minute, I'll try to get it into a minute. We do have power. I will tell you that the social compassion legislation passed a law that Senate Bill 1138. It passed a year ago, and it requires every acute care hospital, every nursing home, and every prison in the state of California to offer at least one plant-based food option at each meal service. That is incredibly powerful, and it sets the standard for the rest of the country. And what it should show us is that we have power in our voice. When we collaborate with organizations that seek to change laws, we can take, because sometimes these are too difficult for us to do by ourselves, but a community can go to their city council and petition for an ordinance. That would be a law that affects that particular community, or their county board of supervisors. You get a group of people, you go to the county board of supervisors, you tell them we want to change whatever situation we want to change. And it's interesting, you get enough people, and if it makes sense, it'll get passed. We did this in the state of California. We're doing this in New York. We're trying to outlaw live markets, and we're in the legislature now, both in the state of California and in the state of New York, to outlaw the live markets, because we think that's where potential new pandemic viruses can be born and will be born. We need to outlaw them. So we really have power. You need to put together a small group of people, go to your city council, your board of supervisors, your legislatures for your state, and you really can make magic. You can make things happen, but you have to go through the channels. And if people need help with that, then go to socialcompassionlegislation.org, read about what we've done on our website, and copy it. That's how I want to end this, because we really have the power, because we're the ones that spend the dollars. So in the end, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. When the good witch told Dorothy, all you have to do is click together your heels. And that's really what I want to do, wake people up. We can click our heels together, get a group of people together, and change the laws to kind of make people do what we think they need to do. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. I hope everyone was listening to that. Thank you. I'm going to go, actually, Rachel, I'm going to go to Ashley first, and then you, and then Rio. Ashley.
Hi. I just want to say what a pleasure this has been, hearing everybody speak and everyone's rebuttals. I feel as though I talked about education at the beginning of this, and I feel as though I went from here to here just from everybody speaking and gaining all of this knowledge. So I really, really appreciate it. Diane, thank you. I'm not really sure that I have anything specific to add to this particular topic. I will say that I am very, very, very happy that someone made the point of saying that not everybody has the means to Wi-Fi to order fresh fruit and vegetables and produce and whatnot from Amazon, Instacart, or things like that. I'm really, really happy that someone talked about that, because that is very, very important. And I do think it actually starts there with gaining the means to, or having it readily available for people, for all people, to be able to eat healthy and live a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, I agree thoroughly. Thank you so very much, Ashley. Rachel?
Hi. Yes, I want to say thank you to everyone. It's been really informative and lovely. And I think we need more conversations like this, open conversations, in order to make change. One of the biggest faults our food system has had is that it does discriminate against people. It discriminates against communities, especially communities of color, and we've seen that time and time again. And a large part of that is this industrialized food system that we continue to subsidize, that we continue to pour our taxpayer dollars at the end of the day into. It's really just prioritizing products that are commodity like corn and soy and are not providing food for people who live locally. If we can invest in a regenerative organic system, it would make healthy, affordable food for everybody. Not only that, but we know our current industrialized food system, including animal agriculture, including transportation, including all of these different facets of our food, is causing 44 to 57% of all greenhouse gas emissions. When we're cutting down our Amazon to grow genetically modified soy, which is going towards the Impossible Burger, we are creating greenhouse gas emissions. When we are purchasing things like canola oil and vegetable oil, it is creating greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, not everyone can afford healthy food right now, but that is what we have to work towards, a system that allows everyone to have that food and doesn't just lower the price of these unhealthy foods. So we need to work together towards this regenerative organic system that at the end of the day is going to benefit everyone, where farmers will not be exposed to things like glyphosate and Roundup. It will benefit the consumer because we will be healthy, our healthcare costs will be less. It will benefit everyone regardless of geographical location or background. It will benefit our environment because we'll be able to actually mitigate some of these carbon emissions and bring them back into the soil and create more nutritious food. So I think that has to be the answer going forward, and working together that is possible.
I am so glad that you once again mentioned the Impossible Burger, because I feel like I'm on a fight down here in the United States to get people to recognize what it is. Thank you for that.
I'm with you. I just want to add, I'm with you all with the Impossible Burger. It is a huge problem.
Could you explain why quickly, very quickly, why, Diane?
Why do we have to say, okay, it's a halfway measure? Like, we'll get there to the cheap all plant-based. It's processed, it's genetic engineered, it is not healthy. I tell people, have a pasture-raised meat burger, beef burger, over having an Impossible Burger. That's how much I dislike them. They're not good for you. They're processed.
So that again is PR, and a tremendous amount of PR, people having enough money to actually place something above other things, and that is where the politics of food comes in. This conversation could go on and on and on and on, but I'm going to bring in Rio and we will end this, but then Vanessa will explain what we're doing so that we can go on and on and on. Rio, please. Rio, go ahead, because it looks like you're frozen again, but hopefully we can hear your voice. So I think with Rio, if you hear me, wait a second, Vanessa. Rio, if you hear me, please unmute yourself and then speak. There we go.
I did. Okay, so I'm sorry I'm frozen. Some of the other speakers mentioned raising your own food, and I think that is an excellent idea. 100 years ago, we didn't have the supermarkets that we have today. How did people get their vegetables? I did a show with a gal who lived in near Pasadena, and she bought a property that had a lot of fruit trees and berries, blueberries, raspberries, all kinds of berries, and there was so much abundance that her and her family could not consume it. So then she got the idea, well, maybe I can reach out to the community and either share or barter my excess produce, because she was just seeing it go to waste. And I think this is an excellent idea. I did a show with her, how she organized her community, and one day a week, everybody would meet and they would barter. Like one person would, was excellent at growing tomatoes, another at cucumbers, one at apples, one at pears, and they would all barter their produce. And I think this is an excellent way to proceed, because in the supermarkets, we're not going to get the kind of produce that we really need to be healthy. We need produce that is grown in humus-rich soil. Humus-rich soil makes the soil fertile. And when plants are grown in that and people eat those plants, then we become as healthy as those plants. It is very important. So I think, as some of the other speakers suggested, we should get back to nature and start growing some of our own food and start bartering with each other that food that we're growing.
Yes, thank you for that, Rio. And in LA, in Los Angeles, California, there's a group called Low-Hanging Fruit, who pick low-hanging fruit that usually fall to the ground and then distribute it. There's so much we could have gone into that we have not had time for, but Vanessa will explain how we can still get there. Vanessa?
All right, so just first of all, our next topic next week is going to be GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. That's July 29th, where we're going to have the honor of having Rachel Parent again, and Diane Reeves and Rio. And we'll also have Paige Parsons-Roach, and Dorit will be moderating. And then we have Why Creating Non-Toxic Homes is Key the week after that. We might have a surprise in store as well, but we're waiting on that. So after this series is over, we're actually going to be having roundtable discussions. So there'll be more free-flowing, and there'll be a discussion between everybody instead of the format we have now, which is more a speaker and the moderator asking each one questions. It'll be more like a roundtable where everyone can interact and bounce the ideas off each other. And it'll be, we might have an apropos topic of the week of something that's going on that we want to discuss. And our first topic is actually going to be the power of language and how language matters so much. And so we invite you all to tune in and watch. We are thrilled to have you, and we've been responding to questions as we can and keep the discussions going. And thank you all so very much to all our panelists for joining us. And I need to sign off now. So I wish you all well, and great thanks to you all, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.